This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast, Chris Graham and Scott German, and we're going to talk, what we have to talk about. Still the fallout of the Bronco Mendenhall talk to the UVA Board of Visitors. Last Friday, his State of the Program address, and I'm just going to go straight to Scott because Scott has been off the grid for a few days. I've done a podcast on this. I've written a couple columns on this. I'm not gonna give any taint to what Scott has to say here. He's just gonna give his unvarnished thought, and then we'll start interacting. But Scott, your initial impressions of the Coach Mendenhall State of the Program address from last week.
Well, let me set the stage. I went to I don't know how delayed I wasn't getting the news, but I went to lunch on Monday, and as I normally do, I actually, or normally don't do, normally I just get the information off my phone, but I actually bought a Daily Progress. And I sat down, and I, of course, as us sports junkies do, that's the first thing we turn to, or I do. And I started reading the article, and I actually stopped and started over, thinking that I couldn't be reading this right. Because, first of all, I do agree. In fact, I'm not so sure that Mendenhall's assessment isn't a tad bit high when he said that he roughly only has a third of his scholarship players that were ACC caliber players. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think that might be a little inflation, a little exaggeration there. But as I kept reading the article, I just kept wanting to read it over, start over, thinking that he couldn't possibly be doing this, because to me, you're just absolutely destroying the chemistry of your team. Because, like it or not, if you got only a third of your players ACC caliber, the players that you're going to battle with next in a couple of months, that's saying to the other 66%, you ain't good enough. How many of them how many did that demoralize? How many of them right now are thinking about, oh, okay, maybe I better be thinking about heading out of town? And what purpose did it serve other than self-serving? And that he wanted to make it very clear to the Board of Visitors, this ain't all me, folks. This ain't all me. In fact, he basically threw London under the bus and drove over top of him about 10 times. If you read that article even further, it went on to say, and again, for what purpose does he have in saying, that first meeting I had with those players, oh my gosh, they were that was the most lifeless room I'd ever been in. They were beaten. They had no purpose. They had no hope. They were completely disengaged, disconnected. He was saying, I just inherited the biggest load of crap you could possibly hand someone. And to me, that served no beneficial purpose to anyone other than to himself, saying to the BOV, you better give me a lot of time. If you're thinking about pulling the rug out from under my feet and pulling my $3.5 million away anytime soon, what you better be doing is thinking about how you're going to convince me to sign an extension to fix this mess, because it's not going to be fixed in 3 years. It's not going to be fixed in 4 years. It might take another 5 or 6 years to fix. And I can do it because here's what we got. When I got here, basically we had no ACC caliber players. Now we got 30% or whatever the number was. He went on to predict what his recruiting classes were going to be in the next 2 years and how that was going to incrementally move up to 40% to 60% to hopefully 80%. How could you? We know that recruiting is at best a roll of the dice, and you can't fully judge how good your recruiting class is until well after they've gotten there, 3 or 4 years down the road. And here he is giving these absolute made-up numbers, and it to me was so self-serving on his behalf that, you know what, don't be thinking about firing me. You better be thinking about how to take this $3.5 million a year contract that's got 3 more years left and convincing me to re-sign one for $4 million for another 5 years.
Yeah. Let me jump in, Scott.
And I'm going to end it at that.
So let me jump in. It's even worse though than you're stating in one sense. So you've only read it in the progress, and you've been off the grid. I'm the opposite, man. I've done way too much on this. In addition to reading the stories written by Sam Blum, and I've gotten some emails from readers who say you should listen to the audio. I've listened to the audio. Actually, the audio is out there. The entire 28 plus minutes. I think it was 28 something. Of the talk, including questions from the Board of Visitors. Some of the topics that came up were actually questions from the Board of Visitors that then Coach Mendenhall answered. And, you know, because I was told, and we've even seen this Streaking the Lawn, which now is totally a fanboy publication. If it's anything other than that, I can't figure out what it is. It's basically a teen pop music. Our guys are the best kind of publication that there is now, because they went off on Sam Blum for saying, you took everything out of context. You need to listen to the audio. Well, guess what, folks? I've listened to the audio. It's worse than what Sam Blum wrote. And in the context, Scott, you mentioned he's saying he's got 27 players who are ACC caliber now. Later in the talk, in responding to one of the questions from the Board of Visitors, he actually says this, and it's an absolute hilarious joke for him to have said this. We played 17 first-year players last year, and that's why we got back into the postseason. Excuse me, there were 17 first-year players who played last year, and the reason you got back in the postseason was because of 2 guys who were graduate players, Kurt Binker, your quarterback, Micah Kazi, your inside linebacker, and a 4th-year player, Quinn Blanding, also Andrew Brown, a 4th-year player, all of whom, by the way, are now in the NFL. 3 of whom were recruited by Mike London. 1 was a graduate transfer from ECU, none of whom had anything to do with you. Ruffin McNeil recruited Kurt Binker from ECU when he was the head coach, after he'd been the head coach there. So, but he says 17 players played last year. That's why we went back to the postseason. And he's saying, Scott, not 40%, 60%. He's saying that in the fall, when the kids show up for fall practice, we're going to have 45 guys. Not 45%, 45 guys. And then we're going to have 65 guys next year and 85 in 2020. He's saying that every kid he's recruiting, not percentage of them, he's saying every kid he's recruiting is going to be ACC caliber. That's the ultimate BS, and which goes back to your point, though. It's self-serving. And, yes, he threw his guys under the bus, and, you know, acting like he said at one point to the Board of Visitors, and again, I listened to the podcast. I listened to the audio, so, you know, don't email me and tell me I didn't. He says at one point that you know, they have metrics and they, you know, do all these things to determine whether a player's ACC caliber. Except now he's saying they're all going to be ACC caliber anyway. What, is he assuming they're all going to meet the metrics? Scott, this is beyond. I thought, I'm going to say it this way and then let you talk. I never thought I would ever come across a football coach more arrogant than Al Groh. I think we've met him.
I think the other 2 words would be a pompous ass. Because, you know, Al Groh, we knew Al. I think Al was arrogant. I think he was somewhat pompous. But I don't think Al was an ass.
Right.
And when you throw 66, when you throw 2/3 of your current team under the bus, and we all complained about Mike London, blaming players, specifically blaming players for missing assignments, for blaming players for not running routes. You know, he threw players under the bus. He did so. At least he did them one at a time. This guy just threw 66 of them out the window of an airplane. Okay? I mean, you couldn't have done any. You take a team on the road and they lay a big egg and you fly it home and you throw half of them or more out the window. or out the door. That's what he did because he's lost. Does anyone out there think that's going to motivate in any manner those players that want, according to the great Bronco Mendenhall, ACC caliber players? No. To me, it's going to say, I'm out of here, dude. I'm out of here because you're just going to recruit over top of it because you've already got these tremendous projections. And another thing about his metrics and his analytics, he brought a guy on last year that was supposedly a specialist in that, right, on the coaching staff. Did anyone, and we're in a press box, we watched that show, did anyone see anything improved about analytics and metrics over on UVA football? I didn't.
In terms of game day decisions, yeah.
So having a couple days to think about this, and also having a very close contact out in Provo, Salt Lake City area that follows BYU football. We had a lengthy discussion last night, and here's what we think. Bronco is either he's doing this, and if nothing else, he's a brilliant strategist because there are people out there that are, saying he has another horrendous season and opens 2018 like he finishes 2017 with a 40-7 loss to Navy in that frigid bowl game. Then there's going to be clamorings, especially with a new AD who has no allegiance to Bronco Mendenhall whatsoever and seems to be pretty influential with the donors. They need to get the money. They need to come up with the money to pay him off. What will we be looking at after next year? $7-8 million?
Yeah.
Well, that's pocket change. So the strategist in him, I think he's doubling down. He's saying, this is a mess. I inherited a garbage truck of nothing but trash, and the initial 5 years is going to be a lot longer. But I'm the man for the job because look at the numbers. Look where the projections are now. And don't even think about firing me after next season. But you better be thinking about extending my contract right now so that I can continue to try to build this program back up from rubbish. The other side is that he may be well on his way back to BYU. He may know that this might, for him and his recruiting style and his coaching staff, this may be a hopeless cause because it's just a bad fit because of a lot of things, because of the culture here, the fact that, oh my gosh, you mean I don't get a player for a year and he gets to go to he gets to go away for 2 and he gets to come back as a man and play another 2 years or 3 years. I don't get to have that 2-year red shirt here in Virginia. He may be saying, well, you know what? If he may be headed back. There's people there that says the current coach, he's been as much of a disaster as Bronco has been here, if not more. They want him out, and Bronco is the fit back there. So who knows? That's my thought for it.
Well, we lost Scott, and it wasn't Scott's fault. Actually, some sort of phone outage. The Augusta Free Press's phones here, the Sprint phones we use, both of our office phones here, with Sprint coverage, went completely silent for about 10 minutes, and so lost our window of opportunity to finish things up with Scott. But I think it was good to get Scott's thoughts on, his thoughts on that story. It still has legs. In part, it's summertime. It's June. There's not a lot to talk about with college sports. We've talked about this the last few weeks on our podcast, especially for UVA sports fans. We're used to still having baseball to talk about right now. Now we're roughly a month away from the ACC football kickoff, a month and a half away from practice starting, and then the media gets fed this juicy story, and I think I'm going to go into a media critique now, and I say critique not necessarily in a bad way, just sort of going through all the media that I've read the last few days about this story with Bronco Mendenhall State, the program talk. But yeah, we're given the story, and then of course you as readers, in case of the podcast, or obviously listeners, you're interested too because you're UVA sports fans, just like I am, just like Scott is. I mean, don't think that we're not sports fans of UVA, big time sports fans of UVA. Bleed orange and blue, literally. It bothers me at night when I don't think I'll ever get over the UMBC loss. I have vivid memories of today's, as we're recording this podcast, today is the 7th anniversary of the comeback win over Cal Irvine to get the College World Series. I mean, that's something that still gives me goosebumps as well. 3 weeks of number one in 1990. I was in the stadium for those. I was a first-year student at UVA for those games. I was there for the Georgia Tech loss, for example. So, I mean, this is I'm a fan, but I'm also a journalist, and I'm not bragging when I say this. I'm just saying I've been a journalist for 23 years. I have actually won journalism awards. As it turns out, not in sports. Kind of funny, but I've won awards for investigative journalism. I've won awards for business writing, and then I love sports. So as a result, a lot of what we do is sports, especially on the podcast realm, and a lot of in-depth stuff about UVA sports. But that curiosity is there, always will be there. And so I see this story, and then I'm seeing the reactions to it. And I say the story, it first got out there through the Daily Progress, through Sam Bloom, the young reporter there, and and he even got it kind of secondhand at first. It was because to say the program address that we're all talking about here was given by Coach Mendenhall at a Board of Visitors meeting. Not something that you would normally expect a sports story to come out of, but there was a Daily Progress reporter there, news reporter there. The comments were shared. The audio was piled through, and then Sam Blum wrote his stories, and then the reaction. At first, obviously, just like with anything, fans reading the stories and saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe Coach said this about the team. I can't believe he talked about the weakest opponent kind of thing," and all that stuff. And then you have the counter reaction. I mean, maybe it was or second level reaction from the fans who can say, "Hey, I listened to the audio tape, and I don't think it said what Sam Blum said it said." And I've got a lot of pushback on that. I've gotten the pushback. I'm not the guy who wrote the first story, but I've certainly been active writing the second stories, and then maybe, not maybe, it is the case that because I'm not, I don't work for, I'm not a 24-year-old kid working for, a big company with a sports editor and a managing editor and everything else. I'm Chris. I'm in my mid-40s. I'm an UVA alum. I own my own business. Augusta Free Press is my business. I answer to me, and I answer thus, to my own standards of journalism, that kind of thing. I can opine more as I'm reporting than certainly Sam Bloom can, and so I've taken off with this story. It bothers me to hear, what I think I hear is a coach throwing his players under the bus. It bothers me to hear a coach talking about wanting to play the weakest schedule possible to win games. And the talk about players come from broken homes and those misapplied, mischaracterized statistics that really came from nowhere. It does bother me. So I've tried to be fair to read. I read in depth the Streaky the Lawn piece that got a lot of folks upset at Sam Bloom. Basically, that was an attack piece. If you I'll say it like it is, the Streaky the Lawn piece was an attack piece on Sam Bloom, who's a low-hanging fruit. I don't know what the kid's done. I can't say I read every word he writes, but I noticed over time that whenever I would scan the message boards on the Saber.com message boards for the football and basketball, some baseball, and also Twitter, that the kid for whatever reason has rankled some people, and that's whatever it is. I'm not going to defend him or jump on the bandwagon here, piling on, but it seems like he's kind of that low-hanging fruit. Again, he's for wrestling fans, he's Roman Reigns. You're supposed to boo him, so you boo him, right? But that Shrieking the Lawn piece was really an attack piece on Sam Bloom, almost his character. I mean, let's think about this for a second, and I'm not sure. I don't know. So I'll be careful when I say this. I don't know the background of the writer for Shrieking Along who wrote that piece. I'm not sure if they've ever worked in an environment where they've had, professional editor. I have. I worked for several years. It was 7 years, as it turns out, for other publications where, you wrote the story. You proposed writing a story. You wrote it. It was submitted. Somebody read it. Another person read it. Another person read it. Then it got published. Sam Bloom's not the one out there deciding whether or not to put clickbaity headlines on stories. The headlines are usually written by somebody in a central office somewhere that has nothing to do with you. What as a young writer. I started as a journalist at 23, right out of college. You got a story, you write it, and you file it, and then the higher ups make the decision on whether to even run it, and if so, do they run it as submitted? Do they ask you to go back and make edits? Do they ask you questions that make you go back and follow up? There's a process there, right? All these many years later, I've done my best to internalize this because I know I am the editor, I am the writer, I'm the guy opining, and I'm also the guy who has to pay the libel suits if I lose. So, that's something that's second nature to me now. But when I was 23, 24 years old, that wasn't the case. I didn't have the power to just write a story and publish it and cause waves. I didn't have that. I didn't have that ability. So, I don't know if the Shrieking Along writer who's writing, whether or not he realizes it or not, it's a media critique. If he's ever had that training, maybe he has. Maybe then I would wonder, if he's been through that process, why he would attack Sam so much, because that's not the editorial decisions aren't made by the guy on the front line. The guy on the front line is just telling people behind him, hey, here's what I got. You guys vet it and make sure it fits, and if not, then tell me how to make it better. If not at all, then we'll just throw it away. And so I say all that to say, that's why when I was talking with Scott, I called it fanboy journalism, because it was almost like I read that Shrieking Along piece and it came across to me as, well, you said bad things about my favorite team. You're not an alum of UVA. You're not a big fan of UVA, so why are you allowed to say those bad things about my favorite team? That's not what journalism should be. I just said it a few minutes ago. I'm a UVA alum. I literally have a Virginia Sabres tattoo on my shoulder. I've got a degree hanging above my desk here. I can't sleep at night when our teams lose. I'm not even sure if I enjoy too much the wins. My wife will tell you that the national championship baseball win in 2015, she, without me knowing, she was filming me with the phone for the moment of the last out. It turned out to be the last out, and she showed me the video afterwards, and she didn't even post it because it was so depressing. Because she expected me to be jumping all around the room and throwing stuff up in the air, and all I did was look relieved that Virginia won, but it was relief. It was not jubilation. And so, David Teal's piece I thought was fair, and I'll say this about that piece again. I don't know the inside of this, and so I could ask David. He could tell me, or maybe he wouldn't tell me. But that piece now, what David wrote, and I like, David Teal there's a reason he's in the Hall of Fame and he wins all the Sports Writer Awards every year. He's damn good at what he does. He writes in a style that's very conversational, like I try to write as well. And he says, look, I read the story, and then I listened to the audio, and then I got to talk to Carla Williams and to Bronco Mendenhall. He wasn't, certainly his piece wasn't anywhere close to fanboy, anywhere close. He makes the point, okay, look, I found where those stats were that were supposedly pulled out of thin air. They kind of were, when David, if you read his piece, read it in depth. Don't just read the parts you want to read to make you feel better. He does give Bronco David Teal's measure of hell. As much hell as David Teal can give somebody. He's such a gentle guy. Sits a couple seats from me on press row at basketball games. He's the nicest person in the world. But reading his words, I'm saying this is him giving hellfire and brimstone. There's some sound and fury here from Dave, because he makes the point that, well, the studies that Broncos cited were, one, the stats were wrong, and two, they weren't really studies. They were informal surveys of players that were linked, and then they were sub-linked, and et cetera, et cetera. They weren't, they're not peer-reviewed studies. There's nothing at all right about them, and they were mischaracterized. So that's, if you want to take issue with Sam Bloom for for making an issue out of that, then you got to take issue with David Teal because he pointed out chapter and verse where Bronco was wrong there. And, I mean, we all get, and this is what point that David made, we all get what Bronco was trying to say. Focus on your post-football life. That's fine. But, don't play the Trump game, basically. And I'm going to tell you, folks, I don't care what your politics are. You're playing this game when you talk about fake news, when you talk about a kid making stuff up for headlines. You're treading down dangerous territory here because, if all you want is your news from the friendly sources who tell you that your butt doesn't stink when they're changing your diaper, well, that's what you deserve. Honestly, you don't need to read the Progress anymore. You don't need to read the Augusta Free Press anymore. I'm going to tell you when your shit stinks, okay? I'm going to tell you that. And if you don't like it, then again, just go to the fanboys and get your news from them. But David also brought up that he was too hard on his players. The 27 out of saying 27 of his players are ACC caliber out of the 81 players, that's too hard. I'll go a step further and say that those are completely appropriate things to tell your guys in team meetings, in one-on-one meetings. You're not ACC caliber. You need to work harder. To say it publicly, no, it's not. I'm sorry, it's not. You're throwing kids under the bus. These kids, and now I'm delving from media critique for just a second, but I said this the other day in my podcast. You're talking about kids who this is as we're recording this podcast, a Wednesday in June. Tomorrow morning, they're going to wake up at 5 or 5:30 in the morning. They're going to go run wind sprints. Okay, they're going to do this with no crowd. There's not going to be 30 or 40 or 60,000 people out there cheering them when they're running their wind sprints. They're going to go run their wind sprints. They're going to have breakfast. They're going to lift weights. Probably go to summer school. Take their summer school classes to get ahead to maintain their pace towards graduation because the fall's so hard for them from the demand standpoint of what you do to be a ACC caliber football player. They may work a part-time job. They may just collapse at the end of the night because of all that. Getting up, running wind sprints, lifting weights, going to class, probably all the stuff related to class you got to do. They do this now. There's no hoopla. There's no cameras in front of them. There's no microphones. There's no interviews. They're doing this now, and guess what? They don't get paid anything. Now you can tell me that they get a scholarship. I'll tell you that I would trade that scholarship for having to pay for all the work they put in that you don't even know about. And that's not even talking about during the school year. Then, from August to all the training camp stuff when the school year starts. Then they've got to balance probably 2 or 3 classes along with getting up, practicing. I'm a guy who runs. I'm a distance runner. When I work out intense for an hour and a half, I do 9, 10, 12-mile runs 3 days a week. It does take a while to get your legs back, get your feeling back to do work, and I do them during the week. It's hard. It's not easy at all. And these kids are doing this, and then they're traveling. The 6 of the games or 5 or 6 of the games each year are road games. Even the home games, they have to stay in a hotel the Friday night before. None of it's easy. And they're doing it for free, and they're getting an education supposedly as a recompense. Bronco Mendenhall gets $3 million a year as a recompense, and you're upset at me for throwing him under the bus. I'm upset at him for throwing 54 of his kids under the bus. I got the kids back. You want to take his back? That's up to you. That's fine with you. That's fine with me. But I know what they're going through. I know exactly what they're going through, and it ain't easy. And then not to be told by your coach one-on-one or even in front of a group that you're not ACC caliber, to be told in front of the media that you're not ACC caliber, that's low. And if you expect me to side with a guy who's willing to throw kids under the bus to that level, you got the wrong guy. Don't listen to me anymore. Don't read my stuff anymore. I don't want you to, because I don't really care. I think those kids are putting their asses out there on the line to entertain you, and you're backing a guy who's wanting to throw them under the bus because what? Because you feel bad that your team has lost a lot lately. Guess they've lost. Yeah, we've had lots of losing seasons. It's not fun, but lowering the bar, and that was that's another thing. I guess getting back to the media critique now, David Teal brought up the issue with the talk how inarticulate maybe Bronco was about the week schedule. and I've said this too. I'm not trying to be too hard on him in the sense of I understand that you schedule weaker when you're coming up the ladder, and this year I have no quibble with Richmond and Indiana and Ohio and Liberty being your 4 non-conferences because this team is still working its way up the ladder. He brought up issue though with the Georgia game. That's in 2 years. Now, according to Broncos' convoluted numbers, he's going to have 85 ACC caliber guys by 2020. But he still brought up Georgia. He didn't want the Georgia game. He accepted it, but I wouldn't schedule that kind of game. I listened to the podcast. Don't tell me he didn't say that. I heard him say it. So, you know what? I mean, you got if by 2020 you have 85 ACC caliber guys, what's the issue with playing Georgia? Georgia just played the national championship game. I expect, with Kirby Smart, I mean, they're not going to, fall back too far. So, whether they're NCAA championship potential level or just on the fringe of that, Georgia's going to be a heck of a test. Now, this is where the UVA guy comes out of me. The orange and blue bleeding out of me. I went to UVA, and I decided as a 6th or 7th grader, I was going to go to UVA because I wanted to be the best. I looked up something, and I had these political aspirations. I wanted to be governor and president, so I looked it up, and all these guys who are UVA grads, who were governor of Virginia. So, you know what? If you want to be the best, you go to the best place, and that's how you become the best, right? And that's what you do. You set your parameters high, and you go out there, and you're the best. Well, except for UVA football, where we want to play the weakest team we can play. And then talking about the other 3 games, the weakest Power 5 team that is he can play. And then the other 3 games, I want regional and winnable. Here's what I want. I want Georgia on Labor Day night because from the time the 2019 season ends, if you've got eligibility left next year, when you wake up at 5:30 in the morning to go run your wind sprints and lift weights in the summertime, you're going to run 10 minutes longer and you're going to live 15 minutes longer because you've got to play Georgia on Labor Day night. In the spring that year, you're going to pay you're going to spend 15 minutes more studying that playbook to know exactly what's required of you because that's what you got to do. You want to beat Georgia. You set that bar high, and then you go and you jump over it. You don't set it low and then stumble your ass across the line. So that bothers me. That bothers me that not again this year. I understand this year's team, it's year 3 of a rebuild. He kind of tore it down a little further than he was given, but it is what it is. He went 2-10 the first year, 6-7 second year, third year, 6-7 wins. I think we'd be happy. We won't be quite commissioning the statue, but we'll be happy in progress to next year. But we're talking 2 years away, and he's still raising an issue with having to play Georgia. No, I want to play Georgia. I want to play another tough team. You know what? And I want to win the ACC championship, and I want to go to the playoff. And the way you get there is not by playing a bunch of you don't play FCS schools, you don't play Ohio U, you don't play Liberty, you don't play ODU. Nothing against any of those schools. Hell, 2 or 3 of them might beat us this year. Very well might. Richmond beat us 2 years ago in that opener, and they beat the hell out of us 2 years ago in that opener. It was 30-7 in the 4th quarter in that opener 2 years ago. They may very well beat us again this year in the opener. So I'm not casting any aspersions about any of those schools, but the scheduling philosophy is easy and winnable. And I'm a UVA guy. I want the best. UVA doesn't say we want a good law school as Liberty. Again, no offense to Liberty, but maybe offense to Liberty. I don't want as good a law school as Regent University Law School. I want Harvard Law School here in Charlottesville. Darden School. We don't want to have some one-line program. We don't want University of Phoenix here. We want Stanford. We want University of Chicago. I mean, that's what we say. That's the UVA in us. That's the arrogance in us to say we want to be the best. What I heard out of Bronco was, let's set the bar low and then just continue half-assed until we get there. That's what and maybe I'm wrong about that. I heard it. I heard it. I'm sorry, I heard it. And so, the media critiquing, I thought David did a good job. The streaking along, I'm not even sure if I'm going to characterize that as journalism anymore. Move off the shelf. Sam Blum got what he got. He's a young reporter. He's been in the crosshairs a lot the last few months. Again, I'm not sure why there's the vitriol that there is. I don't know the kid personally. Don't know the kid professionally. Don't I had one interaction with him. It was kind of odd, to be honest with you. So I'm not sticking up for the kid because he's a buddy of mine or anything else. I'm just sticking up for the kid because I think that the fans who are listening to this podcast are just giving him unnecessary hell. All he did was report what Bronco said. I'm one of the guys who put it into context. You got an issue with me, take it up with me. That's fine. So I'm gonna say this: two fans have, and I'll kind of wrap up as I go through this part. Two fans did interact with me about our coverage, podcast, and some columns I've written on this topic, and it was really interesting. They were very respectful. So the vitriol thrown at Sam Blum, who all he did again, he wrote straight journalism stories. He wrote just the facts man journalism. Who, what, when, why, when, where, and why and how, whatever. I'm the one who's saying, Bronco this and Bronco that, based on, the reporting out there, and then listening to the audio of it myself a couple times. But Sam's getting all this negative talk, and then I got two great emails, lengthy emails, in fact. One from and people who are taking, God love fans who take way too much time out of their own day, and love them for doing it. I wrote to one guy back and said I would like to use this as a guest op-ed because this is well written. Refuting my points, but I don't care. He refuted my points, and he had his own take, and I thought it was well described. But the one guy asked me actually to could you just lay off on Bronco for a while? Some of us older alums have really struggled these last 11 years while he's losing seasons, and just give Bronco a couple more years to see where things go here because Chris, you're influential, and I don't know how influential I really am, but a lot of people read you and listen to you, and maybe this negativity is not going to help the program. So could you just he didn't say it this way. I don't want to characterize it as basically, could you just lay off? That's the only way I can really put it. And I wrote him back and said, look, I really feel passionately about UVA sports as much as you do, as much as a lot of folks do, and I just think this is a situation where you gotta say what you gotta say. And I happen to have a medium to and we've created it over the years here at Augusta Free Press to be able to speak maybe a little louder than other folks can, and that's I'd say that's my fortune, but it's also a lot of damn hard work. 16 years of hard work to get to where we are now, to become the overnight success that we are now. But I got to be honest. I can't, I can't pretend that that the sun's out when it's not, and or at least when I don't see the sun out. I guess I don't, to make that analogy more apt, I guess. But and I've been wrong, and it's okay that I've been wrong. For example, I famously wrote last August that I didn't think that team would win more than one game. Looking at the schedule, looking at the team he had coming back, I didn't think they'd win more than one game. I was the negative Nelly at that point. And then when the team starts 5-1, I'm getting all these emails from people who didn't respond when I first said they'd win one game, but then wanted to bring it up after 5 wins. Well, you look genius now. You've seen the results. They have won 5 games. The team that played the second half of the season was a team I thought would play the whole season. Credit to Bronco and staff for figuring out how to win 6 games with that group. But I was wrong about that. Was it 2014? I went out on a limb, and the limb broke quickly, and said that the 2014 football team could win 8 games, and I said they would win 8 games. So soft toning it there, but I said they would win 8 games. And my analysis there was those top 30 recruiting classes, and the situation at quarterback seemed stable. Of course, it became unstable by about the third quarter of the opener, the loss to UCLA. And I still look at that season and say that team was 5-7 and gave away 4 games. That team had the talent to win 8 or 9 games. They just didn't have the coaching staff to win 8 or 9 games. But so I'm willing to go out on a limb on something like that. I raised issue in another area where I deserve to be criticized. I raised issue early in Tony Bennett's tenure, about year 3 of Tony Bennett's tenure, not with where he was taking the program. I love the style of basketball. I'm a basketball. I mean, I've broadcast, work as a broadcaster for ESPN, calling college baseball. I've done college football as a play-by-play announcer for VMI football the last 3 years. I'll do it again this fall. But basketball is the sport I think I really know. I mean, so I get to broadcast those sports, but I think I really know basketball. I've never done basketball broadcasting. I do a lot of in-depth basketball writing. And the style of basketball that Tony plays is perfect for UVA. The issue I had wasn't that, it was all the transfers that we had the first three years, I guess it was, that Tony was the coach. I understand the kids he inherited, either themselves or he and his staff deciding they weren't going to be UVA caliber, but there were some recruiting hits and misses. I mean, there was one whole class that, like, one kid of five, that first 5-member class he signed, only one kid stayed. And I wasn't even worried. I mean, I was worried about it in the sense of, what it would look like on UVA, that we were just rifling kids in and out. And I was more worried about the APR, honestly, the academic progress rate, that, if those kids then didn't go somewhere else and graduate, that would reflect negatively, not just negatively, like, oh, wow, UVA looks bad, but actually could impact UVA's postseason chances if those kids didn't transfer and end up graduating from somewhere that could hurt us. That was a concern, and I thought it was a legitimate concern. I got raked over the coals for bringing that up. Usually, though, the raking over the coals didn't happen right away. It was about 3 years later when the team started winning. Again, people get really, really juiced up in their strong opinions, at least some folks do, when either a few weeks later or a few years later, they've got results to prove that something you said years ago was wrong, right? That's fine. That's part of the business. I can take it. But what I can't take is if I see something and think that it's wrong, not saying that I think it's wrong. I just can't do that. I'm not built that way. So if you're still listening, we're almost 50 minutes. I'm going to finish up now. For most of you listening, if you're still listening at this stage, thank you, one, for that, and two, you know what you're getting. And I will tell you when things are going to be good. I said last year before the basketball season that team was going to be a Final Four team. I missed out on that, but they were 31-2. Best season UVA basketball ever had as a team that was not even preseason top 25, picked 6 in the ACC. I saw that. I saw the season that came. I didn't see the end, obviously, but I saw the season that came before anybody else did, and I told you that. I didn't say, oh, yeah, well, expectations are 6th place in the ACC and not even a top 25 team. I told you this team is going to win a lot of games. And I'll tell you that I think this year's UVA football team, with the weak schedule we play, I'd be disappointed if they didn't get back to a minor bowl again. But I'm also disappointed that the coach seems to be setting the bar lower than I think it should be set. And I hope that anything. I know I have grown a little bit in this process. I've gotten some negativity, and I've gotten some questions, and not even negative questions, just questions. And I hope Sam Blum has grown in this process. I hope the kid just doesn't quit journalism and become a monk. I think he's, again, objectively, because I don't know the kid, I think he's decent at what he does, and I think he can get better. And I hope Bronco Mendenhall grows from this process. I hope that he realizes that, one, the media is not the enemy. That whole part of his talk to the Board of Visitors was odd, and it still jumps out as odd at me. And two, his players aren't his enemy. Boost your guys, man. They're working their tails off so he can make $3 million. So I hope that he grows from this process as well. Well, thanks, Scott German. Sorry that the call got cut off there, but that's technology in this day and age. But thanks to Scott, and we'll get Scott back later this week maybe to give some more of his thoughts, because he's only really scratched the surface, right? And I'm trying to get Seth Megginson back. We're going to do a World Cup preview. I still got to preview the wrestling weekend with the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. I'm sure you UVA fans are, maybe some of you are. Maybe some of you are wrestling fans as well. I can't wait to hear me talk about wrestling. But, yeah, we'll do all that stuff coming up. So for Scott German, long lost Scott German, I am Chris Graham, and I'll sign off the way I always sign these podcasts off. Wahoo-wah.